I see something that says webinar is now streaming live on custom live streaming service.
That is, we are moving forward. And I get thrown to the wrong page. So I have to go back to a LinkedIn page. Just a minute. I get there. Okay. Hello, John. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. I can still see you.
This is frightening. It may have worked. I feel I've come out of a different dimension.
And I see up in the corner here in the my left-hand corner, it says custom live streaming service.
That's right. That's
Okay.
right.
See that?
So we might be totally alone, but it looks as though we're live.
Okay, good. There,
so people, we have about 8 minutes before we have about 8 minutes before we start. So what I'd like to do is just talk, but in 8 minutes we'll go back and we'll start the thing formally.
Sure enough.
So for the entertainment of anybody that happens to come early, would you like to tell us some stories?
Sure. You know what? I'm good at answering questions too. If anybody has any questions to start off with?
No, okay. The questions is going to be harder because we have to look at the link. So I'm going to, for this first one I'm doing, what I would rather do is people put their questions in the post, and I used to read them later.
Perfect. That's the best way to do it, by the way.
So hold on, and I've also learned to change my screens round so I'm more it looks as though I'm looking at you rather than I'm looking away, which is another bizarre thing I found on Zoom.
Yeah, I got to get a different setup with my camera. This is in my laptop.
Right.
I just saw something else that's I should really go out and get it, but maybe I'll do that today because otherwise I'm always looking at you on a screen, you know, as opposed to looking in the camera.
No, I know. In fact,
and
move them up a bit so it's a bit nearer.
Yeah, I'm just not used to it. Used to looking at the camera.
No, that's cool. I mean, you look fine. You look fine for me. So, a live story.
A life story.
A live story, or a life story, or dead. In fact, a dead story is fine.
Great. You know, stories are really good. I remember, like I said, I grew up in New Jersey, you know, and now I'm in Florida. So, but it was really exciting to me where I grew up, small town, you know, all of those things. And hold on, let me do this. Getting messages. Small town, you know, very, very, very close neighbors. You know, it was one of those places where, you know, you went out and you played with your friends, and if you misbehaved and got into a fight, your neighbor would take you by the ear and take you home, and kick you in the pants and hand you over to your parents and say he was being misbehaving, and nobody was arguing. Parents didn't say, "Get your hands off my kid," you know, all those things. And it was nice growing up like that, actually. You know, you learned more about respect for a lot of different people.
No, I like it because I actually think you learn much more in the raw and sometimes from the education system.
Yeah, and it was great, you know. Of course, I went to 3 different schools growing up, you know, grammar schools, but I still had the same core of friends from where I lived, you know, from where I was living at. I went to Catholic school. I don't know. I keep telling people I'm a survivor.
Ah, cool.
And yeah. You know,
I brought up a Catholic.
What's that?
I'm brought up a Catholic. I was. I'm not now.
Yeah. Well, I started out that way. But it was interesting because, you know, I tell people that I say you go to the Catholic school I went to at first one. My first one was Our Lady of Perpetual Torture. But and my first grade teacher's name was Attila, the nun, one of those things. But it was just about growing up that way. I mean, you learn how to have a sense of humor. If you didn't have a sense of humor, you were going to be in a lot of trouble. And it was good. It was good for me growing up like that.
Okay, but sorry, I can't resist the sense of humor bit, but surely the sense of humor is really useful now as we're going to an interesting phase of life.
Well, you better have a sense of humor. No matter how old you get, and I think we get a better sense of humor as we're growing up and getting a little bit older. My mom had a great sense of humor. My father had a good sense of humor. And so not too many things bothered them a lot. And so my challenge growing up was to get my mom by surprise, because she had such a great sense of humor.
Yeah.
If I could get her to laugh at something that she hadn't heard before. And so and that's really where NLP kind of got plugged in here a little bit.
Right.
When my dad passed away years back. He was in the 90s, and the mom wasn't going anywhere. She's sitting home, like this, sitting at the kitchen table. And I would go visit her one day, and I said, "Mom, what are you doing? What are you doing sitting here like this?" She goes, "Well, ever since I lost your father." I said, "Whoa, whoa, whoa. You haven't lost my father. You know exactly where he is for the first time in your life." And she laughed. And she also gave, she's being Italian. I also got one of these shots to the arm. That's not funny. And she said, "That's not funny." She was laughing. And, there's a lesson in there too. So consciously, I don't go with their conscious answers most of the time. Got to go with their unconscious responses. That's where the information really is, that whole thing. So growing up that way was great. I still have a good life, things like that. I'm a mere 72, and don't plan on going anywhere soon. Plan on being around for a while. So I always look forward to more things to do, more crazy things to learn about. I don't care if they're how esoteric they are. I just grew up in that kind of an environment where, the lady down the street was a palm reader person, and the one across the street down the road a little bit ways, she'd be doing your tarot cards and things.
Cool. Just for the audience, I can say we're just having a warm up. I'm gonna say slowly drift into it, or excitingly drift into it in about 2 minutes. So just be aware we're just having a warm up to let people come in and all that sort of stuff. So if you're there watching us, we're just having a chat, but we'll have a formal introduction in a couple of minutes.
Okay.
Pass the
Now
back.
you can see everyone?
No, I can't.
Can't see everyone?
We are flying blind. I am learning all this technology stuff. So I'm gonna have to fantasize. So I'm even assuming we're live, but some kind person has said, "Just joined and see you and John." So we exist in the outside. So we do exist.
Okay, so far so good.
We do exist. And I do sometimes smile with my coaching on Zoom, because sometimes I wonder if my clients think I exist. However, the good thing is, because they don't always think I exist, they're a lot more open than they might otherwise be.
Yeah.
And I find it a fascinating dynamic. So,
yeah, I always usually the ones I've been on, I could see some of the other people anyway, most of the other people kind of thing, and that way you could always calibrate in the response. Are they laughing? Are they looking at where's the punchline? Things like that. So flying blind.
As I'm sure, as somebody has said, use your wonderful imagination.
Yeah, something like that.
But we are exploring different ways of doing
it. Yeah, sure.
That's cool. As I say, we've got 1 minute to go. So as I say, for all those that are watching, and all those about to watch, I can't really say anything to you. Thank you for joining. I will start formally, whatever that means, probably in about 15 seconds.
Okay.
So, thank you, John, for being there.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for thanking me. Thank you for everybody else that's attending. We've had about 450 people sign up, which is really cool. I think from about 15 countries. So thank you very much if you're watching this or you're watching the recording.
Gotta fix my shirt here so I can
Yeah.
look respectable anyway.
Yeah, do the important things. Do the important things.
No.
To start, I just wanted to mention where the idea of this came from. I was doing a bit of research into AI and coaching and consultants and how you introduce it into companies and all that sort of stuff. And I came to the conclusion that I'm a bit of a fan of the AI stuff. I know not everybody is, but I'm a bit of a fan of the AI stuff. And I suddenly realized the obvious, that if you get a group of people that really work together well, and you give them the new technology and they're honest and they explore it and they say what works, what doesn't work, all this sort of stuff, they will move mountains, because there's a lot of potential power and influence there. But on the other hand, if you have a group of people that are just arguing and shouting at each other, all the technology in the world isn't going to make that much difference. And I think this is going to create a very interesting opportunity. It's going to have an interesting challenge for a lot of large companies when they think about how they're going to introduce all this stuff. So I actually came back, because I'm an NLP trainer and other sorts of stuff, that's saying, well, wait a minute, the technology stuff is really good, but we can't forget how people communicate with each other. So really the idea of this webinar came about is let's focus a little bit on to maybe elevate NLP and maybe other things that do it, but it's going back to the basics of how do humans communicate, because if we improve how we communicate, then everything else becomes much easier. So that's really where this webinar came, and I'm delighted to have John Valle, who is a great NLPer, one of the real experts of NLP in business, and also works with Richard and helps Richard with put on all his stuff. So has an absolutely unique perspective. So, John, can I just get you to introduce yourself a little bit?
Yeah, sure. I don't even know where to begin, but I'm born in New Jersey, not that that's important, and now in Orlando, Florida. And when I started learning about NLP, I was fascinated, first of all. I mean, I was just blown away. My experiences were, I was working in corporate environments, and here I trip over this technology, and it was about, in the early days, the books were about therapy and things like that. And I thought, well, I'm not into therapy and stuff like that, but I always had an interest, like many people, in psychology, kind of stuff. And so I thought, let me go check it out. So I did, and I was blown away. So in the earlier days, I've been doing this now for, I guess it's going to be about 40 years, pretty close to 40 years. And I decided then I'm going to try to take this technology and learn it as best I can. And learning it means to use it, not just have an intellectual understanding of it, is to utilize it. And I should also toss in, I mean, I had an interest when I was younger in grammar. I liked diagramming sentences when I was in grammar school. I know people say, so they don't even do that anymore today. And it's a shame. They should really get back into those things. To me, it's like playing any musical instrument. You have to learn the rudiments. If you don't know the rudiments, good luck playing the tunes. You might be able to get away with it for a while, but if you have the rudiments in place in your brain and in your body and everything else, then you're going to be a really great musician. So it's the same thing to me with learning about grammar and English, and at least in the language I speak. I don't speak any other foreign languages. But I understood the full impact of someone who could communicate really well and get their point across. And that was from growing up. So I had a good interest in learning how to do that. So I could be the best communicator I could. And that was even when I was younger. So then I did have an interest in, also because I was I'd be reading comic books and things like that when I was young. I read voraciously when I was young.
Yeah.
But I'd even read comic books and stuff like that. I'd read 2 or 3 books at the same time, and read a few chapters and then put that one down and read another few chapters and then come back to the other book. But I realized that you could change people's thoughts I mean, I had an idea about it anyway, that you could help influence someone's thoughts by how you would communicate something, and not just verbal language, by the way, also body language. Certain, looking certain way, certain voice tone, certain volumes, things. I mean, whatever you could do as a person, as a human, and that these could be learned. So the biggest first, I guess, idea I got, or the best wow, holy moly, one of those was that I learned I had choices. And not just difficult choices, but easy choices that I hadn't even considered before. So I just dove into this thing. And like I said, I got a background, most of my background's in business. Years back, I did work one-on-one with people to help them solve their problems and things like that. It wasn't really for me that much. I'm much better as a trainer and a speaker, and doing things like that. It was used to go into companies and do consulting. They called it consulting. I called it, let's fix them all up so they could train better and act better and perform better and get results better, faster, quicker, easier, because our brains it's all about our brains. And I think people don't understand that part. I like to explain to people that, NLP, the three letters, when I first saw it, it was neuro-linguistic programming. And I thought, boy, that's a mouthful. And but then I realized that, the neural part was brain, programming part is how we organize our thoughts. And then there's the middle part, linguistic. And that's the meat in the middle. So our language is more important. We cannot possibly do anything that I can think of without our language. How do you communicate other than that? And even if you're doing sign language, it's still a form of communicating. Whether they're using emojis, that's the other thing. Emojis today are now there's people that are the word now today is triggered. See, I don't like some of the new words coming up. Now they're triggered. If you give them a thumbs up emoji, they're saying it's deprecating. And I'm thinking, okay, well, we're in a lot of trouble. We're in a lot of trouble. Companies are in a lot of trouble just having to put up with all these different things that are going on, and new memes, if you would, and new words and all that. So, kind of have a way of dealing with that.
Okay, if I can take it back, what I'd like to do is run through what we're going to be talking about.
Sure.
Is run through the agenda. As I say, one of the purposes was because I realised that despite all the stuff that's going on, especially maybe as the world gets a little bit more chaotic and we're going through yet another period of change, which I think everybody agrees we're going to, how humans communicate with each other through difficult times actually becomes really, really important. So one of the purposes of this is to remind people that NLP is there. And it's actually a very practical, pragmatic way of fine-tuning people's communication skills with us, us communicating with us as well as with other people. So this is what I want to go through. Firstly, I want us to have a go at reminding ourselves of what some of the pain points are of professionals at the moment. What are their aspirations? What are their pain points? Then we'll have a look at what I call NLP demystified, which is looking at some of the building blocks, because I think I agree with very much with what you said. Some people go into NLP and look at all the techniques and think it's all about techniques, and techniques are very useful. But somebody who understands the building blocks and could put the building blocks in practice can sort of invent their own techniques. And if you can invent their own techniques, if something doesn't work, you just try something else. And if you keep going, you will always find an answer. So I think techniques can be useful, but there's a lot more to that. And there's a lot more we gain from, as I say, playing with the building blocks and making sure we're learning about them. Then I'm interested into exploring how, because I think NLP, as I say, fine-tunes our communication and influence skills. And I'm interested in your view, and I'll add to it, of if people want to improve, if they want the end result of becoming better communicators, what are some things they can do? Whether it's NLP, whatever it is, it doesn't matter. But what's the approach to communication that helps people get better? We'll then have a look at some of the things, some more formal courses if people want to go down that route, and we'll wrap it up with whatever we think. A note to the audience, because this is the first one of these I've done, what I'm going to ask you to do is please add any questions into the chat. because it's interesting for everybody to see what questions everybody has. And if you've got any comments at all, please add them to the chat. What I guarantee to do, because my key thing is to keep the webinar running, is I guarantee that I will read all the comments afterwards, and it will help us produce new programs, and I will answer any comment you make where I can add value. So I really, really appreciate if you take the trouble to put any of your thoughts. We are NLP, so you can say, in this context, you can say what you like, because whatever you say has some value in some context. So, you know, please feel as engaged as you can be. And also, if you've got any ideas of what we could do next, what would be genuinely valuable to you, that will be useful too. And I'll let you know what we have got next, which is something on hypnosis, which is also one of my favorite topics. But we'll come back to that. So what I'm going to say is, what do we think of some of the challenges people have now? And let's say, if as you're listening to this, you want to put something down in the chat, please feel free to do so. Actually, I'll go first on this. If I go back to, and this all sounds a bit practical stuff, but when I started doing this, I always asked my clients what they wanted to get out of it. And they were all business and professional people, and they all said the same thing, which really surprised me. They all wanted to manage their manager better. They wanted to manage their stakeholders better. They wanted to set up a business on the side, and they wanted to get better at what they did. And I was fascinated by this because I realized they were a lot brighter than I, because they'd worked out what were the things that were important to them. So I'm going to suggest those people that can't do those things, it's a pain. On top of that, because there is a lot more change going on at the moment, potentially there's a lot of change going on. Some people are suffering from a lot of overload. And the problem with suffering from an overload, you're not taking new information in anymore. You're not learning. You're sort of stuck desperately trying to do all those things you're doing, but you're not learning and growing. So some people have a certain amount of overload. And there's this fascinating subject of not work-life balance, which I'm not sure if it exists, but work-life integration, or the acceptance that life and work are a part of our life and how we deal with them. So those are some of my thoughts of people. And if I was to summarize it, it is around managing bosses, stakeholders, getting sales, because if you're starting a company, that's what you need to do. And there's a relationship bit. But let me throw it to you, John. What do you think people's pains and maybe people's opportunities are now?
I find it fascinating that you talked about how people want to manage their bosses better.
Yes.
To me, that's a real key point in companies. I think it's inherent upon managers to understand that. Well, you know, you got all the old theory stuff. You know, the XY manager. You know, X theory, Y manager. I don't subscribe to very much of that myself, because I figure we have that full range of employees to manage.
Yeah.
So we have to be able to be adaptive ourselves in managing people. At one point in time, when I learned a lot about managing people, I was a manager in a company, and I had about 70 people working for me.
Yeah.
And I had to manage their supervisors, as well as make sure they were managing their people. I think that there's a whole bunch of I don't want to say techniques, but open communication is very, very important. And I find that many people do not know how to talk to people or talk with people. I'm going to even change that, you know, especially when it comes to managing people. And that goes both up and down. So, you know, I worked in a company, the president of the company was a great guy, by the way. He was a young guy, 37 years old, president. And he would actually walk around, which you don't see too much of in companies. And I didn't see too much of it after that particular guy. He'd walk around, and he'd go to different facilities in the country, and he'd walk around and say hi to people. And he made it his duty, I guess, if you would, to get to know their families' names anyway. And so if he walked in your office, Michael, he'd walk in and say, "Michael, how you doing? How's the family?" And you'd say, "Oh, the family's pretty good." And he'd go, "How's Mary doing?" And you'd say, "Oh, Mary, yeah." And you could immediately, you know, there's a whole different level of rapport and acknowledgement, if you would, that kind of a camaraderie. where people loved working for this guy. If he would have tried to pull a leverage buyout, he'd have been able to do it. I mean, all of the employees were for him. By the way, he was a tough manager too.
Yeah.
You know, he laid out, here's what I want, here's how I expect you to manage. You know, da da da. He had standards, he laid them out, things like that, you know. And he did everything he could when he communicated those to make sure you got it, you understood. This was not one of those rah rah ree, let's raise the flag thing, blah blah blah, you know, do this once a year stuff. His whole style of communicating was I'm trying to think of the word, not overwhelming exactly, but you knew he had charisma.
Yeah.
And he would sit down and just loosen his tie and chat with you. It would just about anybody in the company. So I think that I've seen cultures in other places in companies where, you know, the hammer comes down, you know, the boss is going to come around, he's going to blah, 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 he's going to beat you up a little bit and stuff like that. The whole style is really, to me, if you're going to be a manager of people, and that goes for parents too, by the way, because I think they're managers of people.
Yeah.
You know, is going to be in how, not what you can say, but how you're going to say it and how you're going to listen to it. What's the response coming back? I found it interesting because just today I was reading an article on feedback that popped up on my feed, and you mentioned if you guys have any comments or questions, put them in there. You know, we're NLP guys, so we'll take it all in anyway. We don't really care, and that's true. Most people think of feedback as something that's going to be negative, and I never quite understood that myself. So, you know, feedback is nothing more than information. If I want to choose on the linguistics part of this, it's not really feedback, but it's feed forward that we offer people. You know, feedback is what we pick up ourselves coming back to us as we calibrate or watch a person as we're delivering some message. That's feedback. But feed forward is, hey, Michael, can I tell you something? And you go, yeah. You go, well, you know, I don't like the way the pictures are behind you on your screen there. I mean, that's feed forward, but it's all information. Unfortunately, because of the way it's also handled up sometimes, if you want to test this, I like putting things out where people on a call like this can go try things out. Go up to someone who works for you or you're managing them and say the following thing, and then be sure you have some positive thing to tell them. Okay, those are the steps. First thing is to say, hey, can I give you some feedback? And watch what they do. They're going to step back and they're going to go, yeah, sure. Well, what is it? And you said, you did a fantastic job on that project. I love the way you handled that whole thing. That was great. And they're going to wait for the rest of the bologna sandwich, which we call it. Where's the negative part? And then you're going to give me a positive thing again. But just leave it at the positive. Because
yeah. So if I just build on the feed forward thing, because with another hat on,
yeah, go.
I spend a lot of time on feed forward, but the definition of approach is actually saying, give us one or two ways we can improve. I want to get better at this. The whole concept is I want to get better at this. Give me one or two ideas to get better. What's really fascinating, and the idea is if you then go and ask 10 people, I actually liken it to a very simple view of modeling. If you ask 10 people how you can get better and you get two ideas from each, then you've got something to start with.
Sure.
But what is interesting is some managers, they cannot give you two ideas. They cannot give you two ideas of how to improve. And that worries me. And what I'm now saying to clients is, if you ask for feedback in an organization and people won't genuinely help you and give you ideas of how you can improve, you're in the wrong place.
Yep.
So I'm sort of flipping a bit, but I think there is a huge skill in having the ability to ask how we can get better without being concerned about it.
Sure.
I'm not put the words right, but so I'm just building on the feed forward thing, because I think there's something very useful in that.
Sure. You know, this president I mentioned earlier, he wanted to do an opinion survey one time, and I did what I could to talk him out of it, but he wanted to do it anyway, and I told him he had to get back and respond. But one of the things on there was, and this is in the 80s now, so was that I'm concerned about the safety, I'm concerned about the security of my job. And it was a yes, no, or whatever, was a scale of 1 to 10, or whatever the case was. And it was overwhelming. Everyone just about was like, yes, I'm concerned about my job security.
Yeah.
And his response to that to the entire company was, me too. He's, I'm concerned about my job security. And that just blew people away. Now, some of them were really worried. They go, well, if he's going to get fired, I can get fired. But you know what? He was delivering that reality to them. He said, I could get terminated tomorrow. You know, I might be the president of the company, but that doesn't mean anything. So that information given back, you know, that kind of information back to people, and hey, ask what can I do to be better at what I'm doing. You know, I worked for a couple of people. I might have mentioned this once before to when you and I had some conversations. I probably worked for maybe 4, maybe 5 executives that for some reason or another, I don't know, they liked me, you know, I don't know. They took me under their wing and would mentor me without me ever asking them. But I got to the point where I could say to them, how could I do this better? How could that worked out okay, but how could I do it even better? And they would spend time. They would spend time with me. And I think that many managers ought to have that as an opportunity for people.
Absolutely. No, I think that's really important. Because if we can't get better, we want to make it easy for people to get better. We want to make it easy for us to get better.
Well, I'm gonna make another comment. I'm gonna go back to how NLP could be used, because I keep thinking about all these different things here in my mind at the moment in a corporate environment, and I've done this in a number of places. The opportunity for when someone could ask that question, because you know a lot of people are shy about talking to the boss.
No, absolutely.
I mean, I'm being nice when I say shy. You know, basically when they see the boss showing up, they were going to run the other way and hide in their office. That's usually a clue. That's feedback. The bosses should notice that, to me, right? I mean, I would. And so they come to performance appraisals, and that's a whole nother story, except it has loads of communication in it. That's the opportune time when a boss says to someone, well, I think you can do this, you got to do this better. That's an opportunity for the person to say, well, how can I do it better? Give me some ideas. That's an opportunity, but they don't do that.
No, and bosses sometimes don't always like it.
Well,
it's quite, sorry, I'm being a bit humorous here because I teach people through this process, and really some of the bosses are horrified by the question because they pass out advice without knowing how to answer that question. I want to get better at, please, you get better at this. How? I don't know.
Right. Bosses don't have all the answers, and unfortunately, most people rise into an organization either from coming outside and getting a new job, or they're promoted from within. And somehow or another, I always start with the first line supervisors, people. You know, they would start out, for example, as a worker on a job, but they're the best ones, so they're going to promote them to a supervisor. And I refer to that and have for years as a supervisor, because they don't really know how to manage people. They know how to do their job. They don't know how to manage. And then, but somehow or another, overnight, when they get that job, they're knighted, and they say, now you know everything there is to know about managing people, you know, this kind of thing. But they're not really trained to do that. So, and then that goes up to the organization.
I think that happens a lot.
You see,
it's fascinating.
So the performance appraisal thing, I think why it's possible that people, they don't recognize it as an opportunity, is because, and this is about, I'm getting back to NLP now for a second, by changing a different approach to how it's written out. When people say, so if I was going to do a performance appraisal, normally what happens is they would go like this. They would say, Michael needs to do this better. Michael does this well. Michael needs to do this better. And the first time I had that as an experience, I thought, who are they writing this to? I'm sitting here with my boss, and he's talking about me like I'm a dead alien on a slab someplace, as opposed to I'm supposed to receive this as a communication to me, not about me. So who's this really for? And I asked that question. And so, at least in one company I was in, we did change that around and started training the managers to the performance appraisal, when you're going to do them, is for the other person, not for personnel or human resources or whoever else is going to read the damn thing. But it's just a simple change. It's a referential change. And some people are probably sitting there thinking, well, that's simple and that's obvious. No, it's not so obvious. It's obvious now.
But it's interesting because it's a referential change, but it's also a bit of an identity change, because it's suddenly me as a boss, my job is to help you succeed.
Yeah. And there's an opportunity in there. That's for the people. You do it like that, the person might, or the boss can say, what questions do you have? They always say, what questions do you have? You know, and about your performance appraisal.
Yeah.
And I've been through a bunch of performance appraisals, having been an employee in a company, and most of them were pretty good. One of them, well, I got fired by the same guy 6 times. That's another story for another time. The fact that it was by the same guy 6 times gave me a clear indication that it wasn't me necessarily. It could have been my attitude towards him. But anyway, but it's how are we going to speak or write to the person who's supposed to get the message? So, and that's a very simple change. It's even like when someone will say, because I'll ask them, they say, well, I met with so and so yesterday, and I go, okay, and they say, and I talked to him, and I said, you did. Did you talk to him or did you speak with him? Which one is this? Did you do all the if you did all the talking? Sure, you did. Yeah, you talked to him, no problem. But if you were speaking with him or talking with him, then that gives me some kind of indication, at least in your mind, there was a give and take back and forth somehow. And that doesn't happen. That does not happen a lot of times. So it's all in the expression. People are going to tell you exactly what they're going on in their brain.
Okay, we'll come back there. So I
Yep.
like that. Let's go back to NLP itself, because from my take is there are a lot of building blocks of NLP, and I'd be interested in
Loads.
views as to which are some of the key ones. But the ones that have affected me most are things like understanding the map of the world, but we all think differently. That's okay.
Yep.
That managing our emotional state or being aware of our emotional state and others' emotional state makes a huge difference.
Yep.
Meta model, which to me is about asking good questions, because I do love this idea. Sometimes we need hard information out. If you fly a plane, you want it, but you don't want it to crash because you've got the detail.
True.
However, if you're creating, you want to get people's creativity to work. All the hypnosis stuff is brilliant because you actually don't want to be too precise because you want them to come up with new ideas. And storytelling. I mean, storytelling is another huge art in communication, and they sort of all have their places in different, depending on what we want to communicate at the time. But I'm interested in your views. What do you think are, I don't know, 2 of the 3 key building blocks in NLP?
Yeah, sure. Number one is managing your own state.
Yeah.
Your own emotional state. And you can do that. It's easier to do actually than most people might think of, because they don't. That's when I said I learned I had choices,
Yeah.
that I could actually control my own states, my own emotional state. So if I was annoyed about something, I could do something and change that state, because that state would have me do certain things. NLP is not just, I mean, while it's about the language and both verbal and nonverbal language and programs, how we get programmed, there's another facet to it. It has to do with our brain chemistry.
Right.
And so most people won't teach that so much in NLP. Now you're going to start seeing more and more neurochemistry program things going on. We started this in the 90s, teaching about it, because depending on your internal state, you're going to make a certain set of neurochemistry chemicals. And they're either going to help you think better or they're going to detract from your thinking, or some combination in between, or some mix, if you would, some mix of the cocktails you're doing up there in your head. And that's all based on change your thoughts, you can change your feelings. Change your feelings, you change your life. It's very simple. It seems simple, and it is. It's about knowing how to do those things, but that's number one. If you had a bad day driving in and you hit traffic and blah, 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 and you walk in your office all cranky and everything, and somebody very nicely says, good morning, and you go, yeah, what? Start that because you're still cranky. That's changing the environment right then and there. So state control is number one. It really is to me. And so that's learning how to control your emotions, and it's easy enough to do once you learn how to do it. Connected to that are triggers, and we call anchors.
Yeah.
They're called anchors. Now they're called triggers because now it's a blame thing. You triggered me.
Oh, I hadn't thought of it like that, but keep talking.
Well, that's what. Why? I understand the word trigger. I understand that, but they're anchors. Some people are replacing some of the words in our own NLP technology. That's okay, but then how is that being used? But now it's a trigger. So if you recognize, and it's very simple, I'm going to tell you what, in a strategy in your brain, in your and how you do something, how you respond, something occurs, and then you respond to that. There's a small little sliver of a nanosecond of time in which you have the choice to not respond the same way, provided you know how to change that response. So just because someone, the typical one is, be sitting in a meeting, you get loads of people on this call, so they'll know this. You tell the set, you go to a business meeting, you sit in there, you say, okay, here's our plans for next year, and everybody around the room goes, and they roll their eyes, and then all of a sudden you go, what's the matter? You just triggered them, whatever that means, or you fired off what we would call an anchor by telling them something or how you did it with the voice tone, whatever it was. But if you can recognize when you're triggering someone that you don't have to do it that way, you might get different responses. Let me put it that way. The second part is if you're triggered, if you're anchored to certain things. I tell people, I don't know if it's how general it is, but in a lot of cultures, when growing up as children, they get pointed at like that. Now you sit down and you do this and you do that and you do that. And they're pointing fingers. I've seen people doing public speaking and they point their finger at the crowd, but they don't see the response, because just the fact they're doing that, people will move back and move away a little bit in their chairs, just very slightly, because that they're anchored to that from when they were little kids, all kinds of things like that. So anchoring, and that comes to me, that also comes under managing your own states, but you got to know what the external stimuli is. In NLP, just for everybody else out there, we describe it in terms of the thing with Pavlov's dogs, ring the bell, feed the dog, ring the bell, feed the dog, ring the bell, feed the dog. And then don't ring the bell, don't feed the dog, he's going to bite you, that kind of thing. But that's about conditioning, and we're all conditioned to something. You're all conditioned, every one of us. On a very simple daily basis, you're conditioned, and you don't think about it. You see red light, you stop. Hopefully, usually, right? You see green light, you go. I mean, these are simple things, but you don't think about it. You don't think about taking your foot off the accelerator, applying it on the brake, slowing down a little bit when you see the red light. But you've already been conditioned to do this. We're conditioned to do a lot of things, very simple, everyday things. So, but how can you respond differently in ways that you might want to respond differently? So that's important,
so
managing your internal.
Now you're on that topic. What do you think, if people are listening and are interested in that, and they say, well, how do I change it? What would be your answer to where people should start if they want to change how they respond to a trigger? And
okay.
Can I add something? Sorry, can I just add something else? Because I think you said there's something that's really important. We're not aware of our triggers always.
No, we're not.
And a lot of our lives are almost controlled by things that have happened to us. So it's a fascinating thing, getting people to understand what really triggers them. But sorry, I've wandered off.
Oh, well, here's what happens sometimes. Like let's say this might happen in personal relationships too. Okay.
Yeah.
There's different things that will trigger people. You hear something like that and something's wrong right away. And so it'll annoy you, and you go, what's the matter? What's wrong? Well, maybe there's nothing wrong. Maybe they're just thinking of something else. But at least if you recognize, if you're paying attention outside your head, you got to stay out of your head and observe what's going on in front of you with people. If you see the eyes rolling thing or whatever the case is, and that's going to trigger you back, by the way, then you might stop and say, I'm sorry, listen, what did I just do? What did I just say? Something that got you to do that? And they're going to unload on you, by the way, because they don't know, they haven't gotten good feedback lessons on how to apply feed forward in an appropriate manner. But so they're going to dump on you anyway. They're going to, well, you always got it on, blah, 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 blah. Just take the information and then think about what you want to do with that. If you want to change your responses to something, there are different states we can go into in how we perceive. There's another whole topic in NLP. Perception is reality. It's what you perceive and what I perceive, watching and listening to the same thing, are going to be different.
Yeah. Yes.
But how can you then change your perception, or should you change your perception? And we do have certain, I'll throw it out there now, we do have something we all call a shared reality. You know, you might call it a chase lounge, and I'll call it a chair. But when we look at the object, we all know what it is. It's something you're going to put your seat in. You're going to sit down and be comfortable on the thing, right? So we do have what we'll call shared realities. But I can promise you, there are a lot of things I can think about, and you'll sit, that guy Valle is really weird. And there's some things I can think about, and I go, boy, Michael's a great guy, but boy, he's got some strange things going.
I find that fascinating. One of my clients, who's a VP of, I was not going to say what he said, Mike, when you realize everybody else is mad, that just means they have a different map to yours.
Exactly.
When everybody else is insane, life becomes much easier. And he had a similar one. He said, I used to believe that senior managers knew what they were doing. I used to believe that senior managers knew what they were doing. And when I suddenly realized they're just like me, they're finding their own, they're finding their own way, they're exploring it. Actually, he's doing very well. He's in line for his president.
Sure.
Job. And everything became so much easier when he stopped taking it all too seriously.
Well, I always made jokes about upper management when I was working wherever I worked. Jokes, tender jokes, I should say.
Yeah.
I always referred to them as the mucky mucks upstairs, and if I had to go up there to see someone or whatever, I'd say, well, I'll be back in a little while. I got to go upstairs to Stress Me Street, things like that. But some of them heard about those things and they started laughing about them.
Right.
And another part about understanding humans is that if you can get them into a state of laughing at least, or smiling, a good, positive, humorful state, they can change their problems and solve their problems much quicker. Again,
so important. I think this is so important.
Yep, I'm going to go back to this brain chemistry thing. I can refer to anybody out there. You wake up in the morning, you get ready, you're going to go to work, can't find your keys. You go, oh my God, where's my keys? You hit stress management time, it's in there. Blah, 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 blah. You're looking all over the place, you can't find it. You can't find your keys, and it's getting late. You got to start. You should have left by now. All those things, but you're still making not good chemistry. And then you finally get tired of looking. Maybe you're looking at the clock and go, well, I'm already late for work. The hell with it. Boom. That's it. I'm done. You know what? I'm done. Just hell with it. And you're going to sit down and have a cup of coffee. The moment you do that, your brain chemistry changes and you're going to find where your keys are. That's why I tell people, I know it seems like coincidental, but it's always in the last place you look. And it's not because you forgot where you put your keys. It's because you didn't see your keys to begin with, and you hit stress point and started making bad chemistry in your brain. Once you stop doing the bad chemistry, you said, you know what, I'm going to relax. I'm already late. I'm going to relax. Let me have a cup of coffee. I'll get back, get my keys, because your brain is still searching for some reason.
No, I like that. And something else you said I'd like to talk a bit more of. One of my views is that in doing NLP, it's not so techniques are very useful because they allow you to accomplish things. But I think doing NLP is like going down the gym and tuning up certain things. You mentioned something about getting out of your head. So your attention is actually out in the world rather than thinking about my thoughts and stuff. And that's one of there's a lot of what we do, whether we talked about the meta model where you're listening to people's language. You can't do it if you're in your head, because you actually got to take information. You've actually got to pay a lot of attention to somebody else. If you're looking at eye-assing cues, whatever they may or may not mean, you've got to look at how people are moving their body and their physiology in their eyes. So to me, a lot of NLP the benefit isn't necessarily what's sold on the tin. It's actually, it gets you to do things that are really, really helpful.
Yeah, absolutely agree. Yep.
Just talk about sensory acuity, because I think that you came up with the phrase garbage in, garbage out, that actually it's very easy, it's safe to stay in our own heads. It's dangerous coming out and actually listening to what people say, but we can't possibly develop and grow unless we do. So just talk about getting out of your head a bit.
Sure. If you're gonna be doing a lot of thinking when you're with people and while they're speaking to you, or you're speaking to them, actually, either way, it doesn't matter. If you're spending a lot of time in here and not watching what's going on out here, watching the person, you can see maybe you see a smile, maybe you don't see a smile, maybe you see, there are other things, at least depending on what we're doing when we're working with people, idiosyncratic movement. You might see a muscle flitch, just a little twitch right there, something like that. that's usually some kind of an unconscious communication. They're not thinking about something like, let me twitch my cheek. You know, they're not doing that. But it's going to give you some very good indications. You cannot, the biggest, the largest, I guess, effect of missed communication is mind reading.
Yeah.
So if you hear someone say something and you go inside your head and you think, oh, I know what they mean. No, you don't. No, you don't. There are very few sentences that you can utter that will tell you exactly what they're thinking. There's a lot going on in there. So, and there's a lot going on in yours. If you're in there thinking about, most people do this. Most people, as you're speaking, they're thinking about how they're going to respond to what you're already saying. And they're missing something. They don't always have to respond to something you're saying. You know, I learned long ago, it's nice to have conversations. You do the social thing, you have conversations back and forth. You say something, I say something. But in a lot of cases, you really ought not have to respond to something unless you're being asked to respond. You know, if someone says, I did this the other day to someone and they looked and they said, oh my gosh, now I'm worried. They mentioned something and went on for a few minutes and they said, what do you think? I said, I'm not. I said, I'm not thinking. So they said, well, did you hear what I said? I said, yeah, I heard every word you said. And they said, well, what did you think about what I said? I said, I'm not. I'm not thinking about it. You know, there are a lot of also too many
I love
people.
that, actually. I love that. It's giving yourself permission not to think. Being okay not to think.
Otherwise, if you say, what do I think?
Not react. It's also the same as not reacting. It's okay. Whatever
they're asking me to go in my head. Let me start with that. And I'm thinking, if I go in my head, I'm not going to be out here watching them again. I mean, if I tell them and a lot of times when people say, what do you think? Unless you give it right back to them the way they said it, they're going to think you're arguing with them. It's like when someone would say to me, John, can I ask you your opinion? I go, let me ask before I say sure, let me just ask you a question. You sure you want to hear it? You don't even know what it is yet, and I don't even know what your question is, but do you sure you want my opinion? Because you may not like it. My job here is not, if you're going to ask me for my opinion, I'm going to give you my opinion. I'm that kind of guy. I'm sorry. If you're my mom, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to tell you what you want to hear about. But you're asking me to give you my thoughts, which is okay. I'm just asking you, are you sure you want me to say what I want to say? And I don't even know what your question is yet. And most people say, sure, of course. I think, oh boy, that's only half. But okay, go ahead. And then I'll give them my opinion, or tell them what I think, whatever it is they just mentioned about. But I learned that from another guy I worked for, a vice president of human resources. I was in the habit of going to him and going, I was a troubleshooter before this job I was in. And so I could predict if possibly with a good, percentage of probably going to happen. I could go to him. I go, listen, I think we need to check something out because this could happen tomorrow. And he go, I don't want to know about it. I go, what? Because I don't want to know. I said, what do you mean? He says, it's not. He said, let me tell you about how I run my life. I said, okay. He said, it's not a problem until it's a problem. And I thought, wow, I like that. I'll like that. I said, so you're not interested in contingency planning? He said, not in my life. Don't need it. Thank you very much. This is the human resources vice president. Okay. The union guys, they were different. There was a union there. So the director of industrial relations, the labor management guys, I'd go to them. I go, listen, I think we need to pay attention to blah, blah, blah. They go, yeah, tell me about it because we need the contingency plan. And I understood that before they go on strike, blah, 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 blah. But this guy said, no, don't want to know until it's a problem. When it's a problem, tell me it's a problem. Then I'll solve it.
Okay, let's move on to something totally different, because we sort of talk about questions and precision, because I think questions and precision simply, if we can questions and precision and understanding the sequence that people do things makes a dramatic difference to people's results. I don't think there's any, it's the plane staying up there or falling down. So increasing our skills on that are dramatically useful. And I think NLP is actually really good at that. Let's look at the opposite, the creative side and the hypnotic type stuff. Because we're going to be doing something on hypnosis. In fact, we're probably going to be doing some hypnosis while we do it.
Sure.
what do you think? What is the best story you've got? Because hypnosis stories are tied up together. What is the best story you've got of somebody gaining from hypnosis, or it being useful to somebody?
Well, you're using the word hypnosis, and that's cool. I think of it because a lot of people think of hypnosis as I'm going to swing the watch in front of your
Okay,
eyes,
okay.
all that
You're
kind of
allowed
stuff.
to redefine it. You are
No, I
absolutely
know, I know, I know.
redefine
It's
it.
I know. Well, I tell people I don't do hypnosis, because I'm referring that because of what they would in their mind is what is hypnosis. But the fact is, hypnosis is nothing more than going from one state into another state. So the definition comes under something called altered states. So you go
Right.
from one
Okay.
state to the next state and
Okay.
back again. So the real question about altered states is this, and it's whose trance are you in and when?
Yes.
Make it that simple. Whose trance are you in and when? If you're with your boss and your boss is blah 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 blah, and you're not responding, you're just going because and that's all automatic stuff. That's not you're not really agreeing with much. It just appears if you're agreeing, but you're in your boss's trance state basically or altered state because you're taking in the information. You're in your head. So to me, again, the differences about altered state or hypnotics, if you would, is where are you? Are you outside your head or are you inside your head? And if you're inside your head, how far and how deep are you inside your head? You can refer to that as daydreaming, if you would. I mean, I was probably in more hypnotic states when I was in grammar school, just kind of like daydreaming and dazing off someplace and imagining all kinds of wild things as opposed to doing math. Um, these are natural states. These are natural states. So the reason I tell people, and I do, we do various different seminars, and Richard, by the way, Richard Valle, he is the master of hypnosis. I've seen him do lots of different things with people. But if you can learn the elements of what creates an altered state, and then you can have a person go into an altered state without them even realizing that's what they're doing. Um, and there's always a concern when people say, "Oh, so you can make me cluck like a chicken." I go, "Not unless you want to cluck like a chicken." And even one funny time, one time somebody was we were in a seminar, and we were teaching some hypnosis, and someone said to Richard, "Can you get somebody to cluck like a chicken? Can you use hypnosis to cluck, have somebody cluck like a chicken?" And Richard said, "I don't know. What does a chicken sound like?" And the guy goes, "Cluck, cluck, cluck, cluck," like that. And he goes, "You don't need hypnosis." So, and all he did was ask him the question to go back in his head and ask him the question. And the guy came back with the response without realizing he was being set up in a way
Yeah.
to respond in a way that said, you don't need hypnosis. Richard is loaded with humor, by the way. So
That's cool. Okay, we're
now,
more.
now,
Yeah.
now, what I was going to say is in terms of your
Yeah.
communication, if you're well skilled at using, for lack of a better word, hypnotic language, which doesn't mean sit back, close your eyes, and take a nice deep breath. It's what can you do that's ambiguous enough. The language is ambiguous enough. Here's one that'll it gets me, and it has to do with both meta model and Milton.
Yeah.
The ambiguous stuff. Honey, what do you say we plan a vacation? Okay, good. All right, good. I'll take care of it. All right, good. And he plans a vacation. And then next thing you know, she's going camping in Alaska. And he says, okay, trip's all made. We're leaving next Saturday. We'll be gone for a week. You're going to love Alaska. She goes, what do you mean Alaska? He goes, I booked us a hunting trip. She goes, well, that's not a vacation. When I said vacation, I thought, Tahiti. We'll go lay on the beach in Tahiti and drink umbrella drinks. So he innocently, not purposefully, maybe purposefully, I don't know, applied that vacation and forgot to say, where would you like to go, honey? When you call that chunking down a little bit, same thing happens in businesses. Sometimes the language is so ambiguous and not specific enough.
No, absolutely. Absolutely.
You
Can I,
know, I'm gonna,
yeah.
I'm gonna throw something out there for
Yeah. Go on. Go on.
it's how people are easily self-hypnotizing or how it can be induced in a simple fashion. You know, there's only a few contexts of gathering information, which is fantastic. What we teach people how to ask very specific questions. You know, ask for the information you want. It's much easier as opposed to beating around the bush kind of thing. You know, I mean, and that's a learned skill. And some of it has to do with people feeling uncomfortable asking specific questions. You know, so you learn to ask those questions so you can get a little bit more specific information from people. And by doing that, you're probably going to hit the point better, even when you communicate it that way. But there's 5 contexts, okay? What, where, how, when, who. And then there's another one called why. But why is totally, I put that in a different category because why asks for motivation. And most people aren't going to tell you what their motivation is because then they know you're going to be able to flip that on them, argue with them about it, blah, blah, blah. Well, let's go with the 5. There are 2 that are really important, and actually 3, but for management purposes, I could tell you immediately what annoys people in terms of they're doing their job and being communicated to them by their boss.
Yeah.
It's the people do not mind being told what to do or what needs to be done. They do not like being told how to do it once they've been trained. So when the boss goes in and says, here, I want you to do this job, okay, but this, here's how I want you to do it, blah, blah, they're off already. They're turned off already. They're shut down, boom. And they haven't even asked them anything yet. So in terms of, again, the communication thing, most people don't mind being told what needs to be, here's the objectives. Now, comes to the strategy, how to do it, let the employee do it. As long as they're trained. Once they're trained, then let them do it. They may not do it exactly. I want you to use your left hand, not your right hand. Oh, come on, you got to be kidding me. What's the difference? All I got to do is push the button, right? What do you care? I could use my toe if I want to. It shouldn't matter to you as long as that button gets pushed on the machine.
Okay, that's cool. I want to move on a bit now. If somebody wants to get good at this stuff, very top level question, very simple top level question. If somebody wants to get really good at communication and influence skills, what are 1 or 2 ideas you'd give them? We'll talk about NLP courses later, but what, somebody said, I want to get really good at communication and influence. What are the top things you'd suggest?
I would recommend some kind of go learn something about really good specific communication. To me, that's important. You got to practice stuff, It's one thing to get ideas and be motivated. That happens a lot. People get motivated to go do something and learn something. But then how do they kick something in? How do they kick in a plan of action, actually go and learn it? And I find that in a lot of cases, not all cases, but in many, many cases, when you get into upper management, they don't need training. They're not going to go and they think to themselves, well, not really. I don't need that. I'm good. I've gotten this far so far in my life. I'm doing well, making good money, blah, blah, blah. I'm running this company. They're getting results, yada, yada, yada. And that might all be true. So maybe they don't need anything new. But there's a whole list of things I could run down and ask them certain questions that might pique their interest in learning more about themselves, first of all. That's part of it. I have people who don't even realize that they overthink and that they drive other people crazy by overthinking, and they create more problems than they solve by overthinking.
Now, I find that fascinating because it's like some of my more intelligent clients are the people that don't do anything because they think of all the reasons why it won't work.
Of course.
So the thinking thing, I'm obviously being a bit mischievous here, but sometimes my sillier clients get much better results.
Sure.
Because they're good at action and they're good at doing stuff.
Well, the chances are, just based on what you commented, is because I love you put something out there and we can link it back to whatever we've talked about so far, is the person who's doing the overthinking and not able to get, whatever, all the reasons why it's not going to work, or they're generating different brain chemistry than the person who's being silly. Person being silly is having a good time and they're laughing. They're entertaining themselves even, but they're making this different set of neurochemicals. So therefore, they're going to be more creative.
Okay. Well, I want to move on because we're coming to the end. Coming to the end of time sounds very strange. But
Shoot.
We're coming to the end of we're coming to the end of the seminar here. If people formally want to get better, there are many ways of informally wanting to get better. I'm going to say a bit, then I'm going to hand it to you, because what I tend to recommend to people is that NLP was started by Richard and John. I'm a Richard trainer, and therefore I always say if you can go with the guys that started off. So I'm going to get you to talk about their training and your training. Obviously, there are a lot of Richard certified trainers around the world, which is another option. The third option, just to make people aware of, there's something called NLP Eternal, which is your and Richard's, a lot of your and Richard's back catalogue and material of seminars, which is I found it a very good way of topping my own learning up, because it gives me a way. And I'll talk a little bit about what I do, but would you like to go first? What are some of the things that you're doing where people can learn more about this?
All kinds of things. We're always training someplace.
Yeah.
And the base technology is always the same. The rudiments wherever we go, because we're going to get different people that come in, and there are different levels of experience, if you would, or NLP experience, or whatever the case might be, or they know nothing. I say that you got to learn some things and practice. And I mean, really put stuff into practice, even if it's just one little thing at a time. We got loads of summer. We're going to be in Italy in at the end of May, I think it is. And we're back in July. We're in Orlando, Florida, blah, blah, blah. Just go to, well, you'll give them the information later. They can do that. But let me tell you a little bit about the thing about NLP Eternal that I like that we put it up there. Yeah. It's all streaming, first of all. So you can have your phone, you're on a lunch break, you want to listen to something, you go do that on your phone if you want, your computer, whatever. I used to carry in my car tape sets of our own seminars, even when some things Richard may have done, and I would keep them in my car and I'd plug them in. I'm going back to cassettes now. I pop cassettes in, and I don't even know how many times where I've listened to these sets. And at certain times in certain cassettes, whatever, I'd be sitting there driving to listen. I go, wait a minute, when did he put that on there? Because no matter how much I've listened to them, I could have thought I memorized them. All of a sudden, I find out there's something I didn't get to begin with. It was the same thing with one of our seminars, one of our trainers, and I laugh because it's one of our trainers. He's one of our best trainers. I don't want to mention his name. And big business, does business. And he was in a seminar with me. He'd probably been there 8 times. I don't know, same seminar, persuasion, it's a sales thing. And he gets up, and I'm talking about something. He gets up and he walks out of the room. And I thought, oh, he must have a phone call to make, or maybe his phone's, or I don't know, And later on, I said to him, we had a coffee break, and I said, everything okay? He said, yeah. I said, well, did I say something wrong? Did I offend you or something? I saw you get up and walked out of the room. You didn't just walk out, by the way. You kind of went out really fast, so I hope everything's okay. And he said, oh, yeah. I don't know how many times I've been here. I said, I don't know either. He said, why? What happened? He said, there's one thing you said, and I've got to believe you said it before, but the first time I got it, he said, I went over, I got to the phone, I pulled my phone out, I called the client. I've been working her for 3 years. 3 years. So I'm staying in touch with her, blah, 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 blah. I'm just not able to close her. Boom. I just bagged a 400,000 pound contract. Yeah. And I said, oh, where's my commission? He goes, no. I already paid for the seminar. Come on, you got to be kidding me. So, and still to this day, I'll sit in the back of the seminar room a lot of times when Richard's teaching, because I'm going to pick up some new things. If I'm paying attention, I'm going to pick up some new things. I did sales trainings for companies. I would pick up new things from the salespeople, the things that no other salesperson would ever teach people to do. Like acknowledge the time that you're spending with them. Yeah. Most people don't even do things like that. So NLP Eternal is a wealth of information out there. And my son runs that for me. And he puts something new up there every month, is on there. It just keeps growing and growing and growing. And it's not even a lot of money kind of thing. But you got a code. You have a link for that.
I put it. I'll send everybody a link. To remind everybody, I do one-to-one NLP training around the world, which for the right people is really good. The wrong,
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
wrong people, it doesn't work. But for the right people, it's really good. It goes on for a minimum of 6 months. And I'm going to give it a little plug, but only 2 minutes.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
The advantages are that because it's one-to-one, we spend a lot of time working out what will make it valuable to you. And one of the things I've learned in doing this is the more people connect to the value they'll get from it, the harder they work, and therefore they do get more value from it. So this thing that because it's one-to-one, we can spend time on you and get you to work on what was really valuable to you makes a lot of difference. The second point is that I'm still there when things go wrong. And I smile at this because I'm there for 6 months. You try something, it doesn't work, I'm here. And I actually think the best learning is when we do something, we don't quite get the results we want. We have to dissect it, we have to put it back, and then we keep trying it until we get something that really works. So there is something valuable about somebody being there, especially if you set something really important in your life. You've got somebody there that's helping you get it. And the third one, and it's another time thing, I think a lot of success is about establishing small habits. That if you set big goals, what do we call them? A big direction, something really exciting, and we do a little bit every day. I know it sounds trite. We do a little bit every day, we get there. And it is really powerful having somebody that you check in with every week that helps you keep on that journey. And with the NLP stuff as a sort of amplifier, because one of the ways I describe NLP is there are lots of good courses out there, but NLP is an amplifier that helps you implement stuff and put it into practice.
Yep.
So yep. I just mentioned if you're curious, I'm going to send everybody some links afterwards. If you're interested, give me a call. But as we sort of come to the end of this, I really want you to thank you for really listening. It's really appreciated. Any suggestions of other topics that we could do, any thoughts that you may have, absolutely great. If you don't like it, that's good too. But a lot of people get a lot of value out of this stuff. And that's really what I've got to say, other than have a good, have a really good time, have a really good year. Remember to enjoy yourself and be successful. John,
Good.
last words for you.
Yeah, I have to tell you something about Michael, because and he's not going to remember this necessarily because I know how busy he is. When I first met Michael, well, the first time I met Michael was different. He came to a seminar with his some of his family and stuff. That was cool. And then there was doing another seminar somewhere overseas. And Michael said to me, somehow, you emailed me, whatever, said, can we meet? I'd like to speak with you before I even go into this seminar. And the way he had said it to me, I mind read that he had some concerns. I don't know if he had concerns or not at this point in time, and I said, sure, absolutely. I'll only have breakfast. And we had breakfast. And this was in the UK. So we had an English breakfast, which is not the same kind of breakfast I would have in Italy, but was still an English breakfast. Michael is probably the most detailed guy when it comes to getting results. He doesn't leave many stones unturned. I thoroughly enjoyed the breakfast, not the breakfast itself, but Michael, because he was asking me some good questions which had to pertain to his future, basically. That pertain to that, not in a direct way, but that he asked me some questions I had never gotten from anyone. So I tip my hat off to Michael. I don't do these Zoom things for a lot of different people. I just don't. I'll do one thing on sales or something like that, but Michael is well versed. He understands the technology. He's I don't like the word expert, so I'm going to say he is an expert, but even though I don't like the word, because he is fastidious. He will not let go of the problem until it's solved. And I tip my hat off to Michael, just so you guys know. All right. And again, Michael, you know what I think about you now. And I think it's great. The stuff he does is great. It's a very strange way that he does it. And but I've seen his students and they are very, very good. So I tip my hat off to you again. And it was good being with all of you. I'll see you again, I think. And we'll see what we get to uncover next time. And remember, to learn something about NLP, there's only 2 requirements. You need to have a brain and want to learn to use it. Those are the only 2 things. So thank you.
Okay. Thank you, John. Thank you, everybody else. Have a really good time.
Thank you.
Cheers.